Hi, my name is Travis Lindsay. I'm here for the Center for Entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton. And with me today is Ryan. We just got a message earlier today that Ryan became a member of the Inc. 5000. Ryan, it was number 534, correct?
That is our ranking this year, which we are super proud of.
Yeah, and you should be. I mean, I'm looking at my notes right here. So the Inc. 5000 is based off of sales over the last 3 years. So from 2020 to the end of 2023,
Yep.
you placed among the top 10.7% of honorees. And what was your growth rate over the 3 years again? It was over 800%, right?
833%.
833%. So how the heck did you do that?
Well, as the sales pitch, as Professor Jackson's poking me in the side here, of course I have to say it's totally due to my time and graduation from the Cal State Fullerton Center for Entrepreneurship.
Well, of
But
course, that goes without saying, but like
of course,
what were like the second and third reasons?
so yeah, I can't pay enough respect to that degree program. When I was in it, I didn't really totally know what I was doing because nobody ever, that's the joke about entrepreneurship. You can teach things about it, but you can't actually teach the job function. So for me, over those past 3 years, if I had to boil it down to a couple things, it is a painful amount of focus on revenue. So through 2020 and 2021, this was like COVID times for our industry, which is the promotional products industry. For those of you who might be listening and don't know, our company slogan is anything with your logo on it. So t-shirts, hats, drinkware like Travis is drinking from. But that's really what we do is take a client's brand and work in partnership with their marketing department to put it on anything and everything that they want, whether it's project specific, a giveaway t-shirt at a baseball game, whatever it is. And so 2020 and 2021 were horrible years for our industry.
I was going to
Um,
say, yeah.
and so some of the data I saw come out of our national, like US based industry publications was talking about everyone being down 40 to 60%. So it's like you were at X and now you were at maybe 0.5X or 0.6 or 7X of the prior year. For us, though, that year period, and this goes back to the Inc. placement, that was kind of our like, what's the term that kids use now? Our glow up.
You
Like,
know, I have no idea, Ryan. I'm less in touch with culture than I'm sure
so it's like
99.99% of
your
people.
blow up, but like your glow up. So that
Okay.
2020 was the start of our glow up. Maybe we can put a link to Urban Dictionary on that.
We
Hopefully
could. I
I'm using
won't.
I'm hoping I use the term correctly. Some 20-year-old person who's way smarter on this stuff than me will correct me on the chat. But so that was like our come up period. And so through COVID, I was really a solopreneur and our revenue was right around 200,000, 250,000, and we stayed flat through COVID. And so for me and like my entrepreneurship background, again, from the Center for Entrepreneurship, told me like, if you're flat, you're not growing, you're dying. And I was scared through all of 2021. Like, we're just flat. We're not growing. What are we going to do? My wife's like, talking to her other people who are like tangentially related to the industry, and they're like, it's a bloodbath everywhere else. Do not tell anyone in the industry that you're flat because they will come kill you. And so that was the joke through COVID for us is we just pivoted. And so the YMCA was our top client, and the YMCA needed they needed a lot of things. They just needed a lot of different things. And other companies, like what we call distributors in our industry, just were not able to pivot quickly enough to going from selling like t-shirts all day to like the YMCA needed Lexan, like the clear plastic shields to put up at their front desk to separate their member service representatives from their clients who are walking in to scan their badge at the front desk, or a backdrop if you're teaching a virtual fitness class. These companies have never sold this stuff before. Masks and like infrared thermometers to check your kid into summer camp. We were able to say, what do you need? Like, we're here for you. We're a partner. Like, I'm a Y dad. My kids go to the Y, the whole pitch, so to speak. And they just told me what they needed. And hell or high water, we delivered. When other people were like, I don't know anything about selling Lexan dividers because I've sold pens and t-shirts and coffee mugs my entire career. And so that flexibility, that nimbleness through 2020 and 2021 is why we stayed flat.
No, that's awesome, and I've heard similar stories in that kind of industry that you're in. That people pivoted to selling masks and stuff like that, PPE. So, with that being said, I know you mentioned a couple times Cal State Fullerton and what you learned there. And just for people who are watching this who may not know, there's a number of classes that are in the CSUF entrepreneurship program, in addition to some of the other stuff that we do, like the Titan Fast Pitch competition and the incubator. And in these classes, every student, they do a series of consulting projects and projects where they put together business plans and launch their business. And for each one of these projects, they're of course guided by the professor and a mentor. And these are real life projects. I mean, for the consulting projects, we're working with businesses or nonprofits. For the business planning classes, I mean, the goal is to actually launch those businesses. So can you highlight maybe like one or two of those key lessons that you got from the program that have really impacted you in your business?
So one of the most impactful things that I heard about the program years later that I didn't make a connection until it was said in front of a group of people, that was an inaccurate statement, but it was from one of my mentors in 2005, which was John Brake. He's the CEO of Desco Industries based in Chino. And I ended up working for his company for 3 years. And I only knew him through the Center for Entrepreneurship and his mentorship relationship with my consulting group within, I forget exactly, I think it was Professor Jackson's class. So Marketing 462 at that point.
Okay.
And he told me, he introduced me to his interview panel as I was Ryan's mentor in his MBA program at Fullerton. And that like, it was one of those like shock moments where it's like, I don't have an MBA. Like that wasn't an MBA program, but you're in the first meeting of 6 people that are determining your employment, and it's like, hey, John, I don't mean to correct the CEO in front of everybody here, but that was not a master's program. That was a like bachelor's program, and so that he thought for years that that program he was a mentor in every day was a master's level program told me everything I needed to know about the value that was imparted upon me, because I don't have multiple degrees. I didn't do like dual majors. So that degree track is all I know. To this day, it's the only degree I have. It's my highest degree. So that's all I ever really learned. I mean, academically or in a formal college setting. So that really kind of solidified to me like, oh, I walked away with something far more valuable than most people think about it. Because this guy, who's like a kind of a big deal in the business world, with an international company with 200 employees and an obscene amount of revenue, thought that this was a master's program the whole time. So that said a lot about the program for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And speaking on that from the professor side of things, yeah, it's a lot of work. Each one of those classes, all those projects that we're talking about, I mean, you could spend 100+ hours on each of those, and
Yep.
there's like four that you have to complete, not counting the launching of a business, which is a 2 semester thing where you could spend another 100+ hours on each of those. And so, yeah, the amount of effort that the students, and most of them are undergrad, there's some that are at the MBA or master's level that are taking those lower division courses. But yeah, it is a lot of work. And so were there any other, networking definitely help. Your story I've heard it multiple times where one of your mentors you end up working for, staying connected with professionally, and that helped you along. Was there anything else that sticks out of your mind that's really helped you with your business? One of the things that you were just talking about earlier was how you were able to seamlessly pivot from what you were doing to providing more of what people needed during COVID and the pandemic times. Was there something else that has stuck out in your mind that you want to tell people about?
Yeah, I think that pivot, and I don't know if I'd call it seamless, but we tried our best. The just the focus on like the microeconomic focus, if you think about this in terms of how economics is defined, as opposed to not being cut up and dragged down or dragged up even by the macroeconomic reality of like the outside world. So like, I don't care what interest rates are. I don't care what GDP was last quarter versus this quarter. I don't care what the unemployment numbers are. We have a sales goal at our company that we are going to hit every month. And that is our single solitary focus every month. And that's, I mean, I haven't interviewed 5,000 or 4,999 other CEOs, but to be on the Inc. list, you have to have a painful amount of focus on revenue. And I would say on a profit and loss statement or an income statement, like that is the most important row, because I go back to that. If you're not growing, you're dying. And, you know, that, that focus of just like, I don't care what's going on out there. I don't care what's going on out there. This is our lane, and these are our customers, and this is our focus. And, you know, like the COVID thing, our focus might need to change. I became really good at selling sanitizer, whether it's 62% alcohol or 70% alcohol. And I had to get an exemption letter from the United States Postal Service to send up to a gallon of alcohol-based sanitizer in the mail. Because up to that point, you couldn't send sanitizer in the mail. It's all these little things where you're like, okay, there's a problem that I've never dealt with before. But I'm a decently smart person, at least I think I am. I can figure this problem out before. And so like Grant Cardone talks about this a lot in his books of like how he loves new problems, because new problems means you're growing. If you have the same problems for the past year, that's like stagnation, really, from a business perspective. And, you know, he's pretty aggressive about that point. And maybe there's an argument to be made either way. But I think that new problem thing is like, no, we're venturing into either new client areas, new product areas, new decorating areas for our products that we haven't decorated before. And we need to learn stuff to like do it fluently.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about right there is really indicative of somebody who has a growth mindset. It's like, here's a challenge. How are we going to figure this out? And we are going to figure this out. So that's something that, you know, if you're watching this and you're thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, you really have to have that kind of a mindset, because if you don't, and you think that, you know, it has to be one way or it's just not going to work, then it's not going to work. And I mean, like if you had stuck to your guns during 2020, 2021, I mean, your business, you'd be out of business, right?
We would have been,
Yeah.
like so many people in our industry was or were. And I mean, the real issue there is it's not like it's hard to like think backwards. But if you remember from the get-go of COVID, especially in the Southern California area, the sales pitch, so to speak, was it's 2 weeks to slow the spread. And I think that that language, particularly from the public health professionals, is a huge part of the problem in terms of the business response to COVID, because they were like, okay, well, like my wife and I, we really like to travel. So we couldn't go international. We went to Alaska in February of 2021. It was a lovely trip. It was one of the only places we could go to, like legally. But, you know, if you thought this problem was going to go away in 2 weeks and you're like, okay, it's going to be a rough month. We're not going to meet our month's numbers, but they said 2 weeks, so it's going to be fine. Come to realize my kids were home for 14 months. Like
Yeah.
my kids never saw a first grade classroom because the COVID spanned across their first grade, what should have been or would have been their first grade experience. And so my wife and I are like trying to run our businesses from home with two kids, like, and we were struggling like on a personal level. It was hard.
Right.
And I think that if you would have put that mentality into a lot of other business owners, it's like, oh, 2 weeks, let's go on a vacation, honey. Let's take 2 weeks off. You've been talking about taking time off. But if you did that by the time the 2 weeks elapsed, you were done, because you're like, oh, nobody's buying t-shirts.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that of course was a big challenge. And you were more or less a solo entrepreneur at that time. But since then, you've grown a lot, over 800% over the last 3 years, in terms of revenue. I believe you've had to hire some people on board, correct? How have you managed that? Was becoming a leader something that you kind of like naturally fit into, or is it something that you're continually having to work at?
So one of the main things, and you talk about like synthesizing little sentences from people, like you mentioned the growth mindset. One
Hmm.
of the main things, like from a managerial or CEO perspective, that I bring to the team is that you will never, ever, ever hear me say, my employees or my team or my vice president or whatever. It will never, like, I'll never use that prefix for anybody. I'll say our team, our VP, or whatever it is, because I never think of this from like a possessive mindset. It is, I'm in the mud and dirt with these people and our team of like 11 people now, every day. I'm responding to customers every day. I'm drinking from customer drinkware every day from like a quality assurance perspective. And I do not like this cup, by the way. But the like I'm in it. And if you always think of that like horse-drawn carriage meme. You ever seen that one about like the difference between leaders and managers? Where it's like
Remind all of us.
the leader is at the front of the carriage by himself with the sword, like leading the way, and
Mhm.
the soldiers are behind them, like with the wagon. And then the managers are more like the 10 people are pulling the manager's wagon, and the manager's at the back saying like, charge.
Yeah.
So it's just I'm out in front. I mean, maybe not out front on every single email because from a capacity perspective, I can't be, but I have clients texting me every day for people that are inside sales reps didn't even know have a personal relationship for me and say, hey, I got this delivery. Something's wrong. And text me a picture and it's like, hey, Vanessa, what went wrong on this order? I'm getting texts, so that and that has been one of the most unscalable parts of the way I've grown this business. And my wife sees it every day. Like you can't maintain that one-to-one. I know Ryan, I know the CEO, he's going to take care of my order
Right.
at 800 times more volume than 3 years ago, because it's just, you can't, one of the proudest moments is when I see an order fly by or like an invoice that the company pays for an order I knew nothing about. That is like what my wife always says, stepping into your CEO shoes. That's like my favorite part of the day. It's like, who the hell is this client? Had no idea we're selling to them.
Yeah, exactly. It's the difference between working in the business and working on the business, and you're transitioning more to that working on the business where you're empowering your team members, the team members, and they're taking over more of that role. So it sounds like it's going pretty good.
Yeah, and the other, like on the scale side, and I'll just add this, for whoever's out there, fellow business owners that are bigger than me, smaller than me, growing more or less than me, or just new students in the entrepreneurship program, the focus on systems, it might be lost upon people who aren't doing the work every day. So for me, when I first started, and this is on my another interview that hopefully will get released at some point, and I hope this part makes it, but I started from like an IT business. And part of my IT business was consulting small business owners on their accounting systems. Not so much like being their accountant, but helping them set up QuickBooks. And through that process, I became an Intuit Pro advisor. I think I'm still a pro advisor. And so I know QuickBooks really well. And so when I started this business, because I knew it really well, I was like, oh, QuickBooks, it'll do purchase orders, it'll do invoices, it'll do estimates, it'll do everything we need to do. But with a very small amount of knowledge that I hadn't yet acquired about our specific promotional products industry, to soon realize that was an utterly unscalable process. Like QuickBooks is still our accounting platform, but another software called commonsku runs our business. And that is from the nuts and the bolts, purpose-built promotional product software. And I can do a reorder quote for somebody in 90 seconds from a year ago, for an order a year ago. And so there's a personality part of our growth for me and our company and our team, but from a systems perspective, commonsku and everybody listening is going to have their own, like their industry has the best and the brightest software. You know who it is, whatever your industry is, but that has allowed us to fly. And I absolutely would not be at this level because I remember making training videos for our initial team about how to create an estimate in QuickBooks, and it was a 15-minute tutorial. Like there's so many limitations of that. And so if you're in a system like with your business or your upcoming business, or even if you're an inside entrepreneur, you can be the advocate within that company to say, hey, this is garbage. Like there was so much when I worked at John's company, like the system that they use, I think it was Navision. or Microsoft Dynamics. That was one of the hardest programs for me to understand, even with a background in IT. I didn't understand how all these things were connected, but you know, the user friendliness and the capability are two different things. So it could be difficult to learn, but really helpful. I just happen to luck out with a industry leader who I'm now a commonsku ambassador for that just gets it.
Gotcha. So you put the systems in place and you got that running. You're training up team members, helping them basically take over some of the stuff that you were doing. So delegation is in order. So it sounds like things are looking good. But looking forward, what do you have planned for the future? What's your future vision for your
Uh,
company?
well, I mean, we're up at about 12 to 13% for the year to date. Our goal was 50%. So to put this in perspective, I need to roll the clock back about 3 years. So remember I said about 200,000 to 250,000, and then we hired our first employee, and then in 2021 or two, we did about 500,000. And my wife said, "Great job, babe, but you can't double sales every year, right?" I go, "Okay, thanks. Our goal next year is 1 million."
Right.
She's like, "Okay, it's great to have goals, babe, but you're never going to hit 1 million. You can't go from 250 to 500 to 1 million. It just doesn't work." And I was like, "Okay." And then a year later, the exact same conversation. You had a really great year, but you can't keep this pace up. It's going to be really hard. And I was like, "Okay, well, 2023's goal is 2 million." And then we hit it, which eventually, if you pay attention to the Inc. 5000 list, like you mentioned, that is the minimum sales level the company has to be at, and they inspect your tax returns. I had to submit tax returns and have my CPA sign off on those, not just submitting the returns that already had their name on it, but also an additional verification with the Inc. magazine people to
Wow.
say this is actually a true tax statement. Because anybody can go in and print out an 1120S form
That's true.
and have it type whatever. But this guy's like putting his CPA license kind of on the line there to say this is what the company actually did. Um, so that part of it is always, and then looking forward, I think we're going to hit that 2 million, which is again the minimum threshold to even be on the list. If we keep on this trajectory, I mean, I'd like to get above 12 to 13%, but if we land somewhere in the 400 to 500% growth range, which is again far less than this year, or for that 3 year period that this year looks at, I'm okay with that. Just making on the list is honestly a 20-year goal since I graduated from Fullerton.
Right.
Um, I mean, that list is the list every entrepreneur should strive to be on. But running a $2 million company, even if it's going from 1.9 million to 2 million in 3 years, you might still make it on the list. But you might be a $400,000 fantastic personal service provider of some sort where you don't want to scale. Because the stuff I have to deal with, like I got somebody out with the flu today, like there's stuff you have to deal with at this level that not every entrepreneur wants to deal with. And that's totally cool too. But that Inc. list is like looking at 2 million as the gross revenue. Or I should actually say net revenue number.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of work. Totally get that. And I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy day. I know you got kids, you got a wife. Do you have and you have pets too?
Yeah, I got some dogs barking at somebody outside too.
I got you. So there's a lot going on. So I'm just going to ask you one last question. And this is the kind of the pat question that I ask everybody who I do these interviews with, and it's pretty straightforward. It's knowing what you know now based off all your experience and what you've learned. What advice would you give or do you give to people who are thinking about becoming entrepreneurs? It could be students or maybe people who are mid-career who are thinking of jumping in.
If I had to summarize, I would say just start. Like Alex Hormozy, the $100 million leads guy, talks about this a lot. And he says, your first business, you're not going to earn, you're going to learn. And in my case, my first business put me into a bankruptcy. So that was like my entire 20s. Because I walked the stage from in Fullerton in escrow to buy a company. And that company, for a bunch of different reasons in 2008 and 9, like collapsed on me and like dragged me personally down with it. And so even that is, I call that my $50,000 MBA. Like that first business, I owned a Cookies by Design bakery, and that that experience, like I could tell you all sorts of cookie and baking knowledge, but I was not a baker. Like I was an entrepreneur who owned the bakery, and I would run it and work in the business a lot. And that was a part of the downfall there, as you mentioned the difference between working on and in the business. But nobody wants $75 cookie bouquets in a global recession.
No, not
And
so
so,
much. Yeah.
yeah, so I would say just start because, as the old expression goes, in your 80s or however long your life ends up being, you're never going to be regretful of the crazy stories you have to tell, but you probably will regret the chances that you didn't take. And so for me, it's been that. It's like if I was an employee anywhere else, the only company I could ever see being an employee at in my entire life was John's company in Chino. And but I haven't been an employee for 10 plus years now. And it's that mentality shift of like, you know, it's not like it looks like on Instagram. You're not just going to get an influencer gig on day one with like a Fortune 500 company and be set. Like it's going to be really hard work. In terms of like the content I follow, like Alex Hormozy, Grant Cardone, within our industry and promo, it's Jenna Quaranta. I could send all these links if you want them. These people are talking about stuff that I think everybody who is even entrepreneurial minded, whether you're an inside entrepreneur at a company, you want to start your own thing, but you're stuck in a full-time job or whatever the situation is, this is like the motivational stuff to just get you forward. It might not be every goal that you want it to be, but you just got to start.
Very good. So just get started. You heard it from Ryan. And Ryan, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me. And then you talked with Aaron earlier today, and we'll definitely get that video up as well. And thank you to everybody who's been watching.
Thanks, Travis, and thanks everybody. And if you guys have any questions, I'm sure some contact information will be there.
Definitely. All right. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thanks.